Good morning. So I have a question for you. Okay, so we're going to kind of recap the series we've been doing. We're going to wind it down today, the series called Family Matters, this idea that your family actually really does matter, despite what everything about our culture may say. So I want to start off with this question, okay, because I challenged you guys in the very first week to do something specific. So my question is this, and you don't have to answer out loud, I just want you to think about it. How much time did you adjust in your schedule to move towards your family? Okay? How much time did you adjust over the course of this series so that you could spend more time with your family? Because we talked about the very, very first week that everything in our culture is measured by time. We measure our compensation for our jobs based on how much your 1 hour of your time is worth. We decide whether or not we're going to do something or not based off of how much time it's going to take us and whether or not there's something that we deem more valuable to spend our time on. We talk about our seasons based on how much time is going to pass. We talk about how our day is going based on how much time has passed and whether we've had enough time to do what we're thinking we're going to do. We even help kids measure time based on whatever their favorite TV show or whatever the current popular show is. We base all of our things that we do in our life based on time. And we looked at the very first week and we said the average American family, okay? This may not necessarily represent exactly what your family looks like, but the average American family only has 36 and a half hours a week to build your family, okay? 36 and a half hours of available time out of an entire week. That's not a lot. That's one work day. That 36 and a half hours doesn't necessarily account for overtime at school, overtime at work. It doesn't take into account social media use. It doesn't take in account for the amount of time you have to travel to and from work and socializing with your friends. This is just an average. When you start figuring all of those things in, the number actually drops down to closer to 10 hours a week or less to build towards your family. And when we start looking at things in that kind of lens, it kind of changes things. It kind of gives us a little bit of perspective. And we say, okay, well, why is that such a big deal? Why is this idea of family such a huge thing? Well, it's simple. You go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, and God instituted family from the beginning. He looked at Adam and Eve, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. Build a family. Replicate yourselves. Have children. This idea of family started at the very beginning, and then all the way back in the book of Deuteronomy, parents are instructed to instruct their children. It says, talk about the things of God when you go into your house, when you walk out of your house, when you're standing, when you're sitting. Tell your children about the things that God has done. It says, and kids are told to honor their parents in order to live a long life. And we kind of joked around the idea of, listen, we get that. We love that because kids, if you don't honor your parents, you may end up with a short life. But we laugh about these kind of things, but it's so unbelievably big. You know, the Bible talks specifically about children as being like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior, that they are weapons. And we see this idea that our family unit is massive. And over the course of the last few decades, the family unit has taken a major, major hit. Divorce is on an increase. People who just decide, well, I don't really necessarily want to be married, but I just kind of want to have a family, is on the rise. And the bad thing is Christian families really don't look any different. Christian families are starting to look more and more and more and more like the world. And we ended this by saying we really need to rejuvenate the family. Why? Because the bottom line of all of week one ended up saying this: your family is the greatest tool that you have available to you. Your family is the greatest tool that you have available to you to impact your community, to impact your world, and to make changes even in the lives of the people you come in contact with. But how do we do it? You have to start by laying a foundation. And so we started looking, okay, foundation has to start with parents. It has to start with the people that are building the family. So the very first week we took a look at the ladies. We said, ladies, churches have done a great job of saying, here's Proverbs 31, now run and go. But we as pastors and church leaders really haven't done a great job of telling you what that looks like. So we took a look in the book of Titus at chapter 2, verses 3 through 5, and it says this: older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They're to teach what is good, and as so to train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. This is a big deal. This is a huge calling for all women. We talked about the fact that you guys are called to live a life of reverent behavior. The word they used for reverent is the same type of word that they use when they describe the way that a priest acts. That you're called to kind of serve as a priest in your home, that the lifestyle that you live should mimic that. You're called not to be slanderers. In other words, you're called to use your tongue in a way that speaks in encouragement and joy and truth into your family and into the people you come in contact with. You're called to help set an example for your children and the other women that are younger than you. Doesn't matter if you're 60 years old, 70 years old, 20 years old, 15 years old. There is always someone who is younger than you that is watching you. And you are called to set the example for them and show them what a life of reverent behavior looks like. And it's a big thing. And we said in week 2 that to be a godly woman requires help. It's not something that you can just go out and do. You have to have something to model it off of. So we challenged you, ladies, to take a look at the people that are coming up behind you and ask yourself the question, what is the example that you are setting for them? How are you encouraging them to pour in? And then last week, because I am one of you, I kind of beat up on the guys a little bit. We talked about this idea of biblical manhood. And in our culture, we talked about this idea that manhood, someone is determined to be a real man based on how much money they have, how athletic they are, whether or not they cry, whether or not they have a beard, and whether or not if you have a beard, you can change a tire. All these goofy little things that don't really add up to much when you start looking at what a real man is. And so we talked about it. Okay? What is a real man? We looked in the book of Genesis in chapter 2, verse 15, where it says this, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Men are designed to work. We are designed to get out there and do. We're told we are supposed to be these things. And then even beyond that, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, it says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. But then it goes into this, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. We talk about the fact not only men are we called to work, but we're also called to be the spiritual head of our family. Jesus is the spiritual head of the church, showing the church what direction it's supposed to go and how it's supposed to carry itself. Men, we are called to be that for our families. We are called to set a spiritual, biblical example for our families. We are supposed to disciple our families. And we even kind of went a little bit further and said, well, listen, it's also kind of, we need to undo something and realize something, because men have gone their entire lives blaming Eve for the fact that we're not in the garden. And realistically, we looked at a passage of scripture in Genesis in chapter 3, verse 17, where God looked, he said unto Adam, God said this, I said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree in which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Because we saw that there was a discipleship issue there. Adam did not necessarily, he must not have told her exactly what the deal was, because she went in and said, told the serpent, well, no, he said that we're not supposed to eat of that tree or touch it, which isn't what God said. When there's a breakdown in the family, it starts with us as the men and the head of the family. And just like with ladies, we ended by saying this, real men need real men to show them how to be real men. In order to become a godly man, you have to have a godly man that you are being mentored by. Regardless of whether you are 50 years old mentoring somebody below you, or whether you're 50 years old as a new believer who has someone who is further ahead in their spiritual journey than you are, teaching you what it looks like to be a godly man. And that's where we end up falling short. We started learning that when real men step up and become real men, their families begin to root deeper in their faith. And when real men, real biblical men step up and act as real biblical men, they begin to replicate themselves in their children. But let's be honest. If you are a father or you are a mother, let's just be real honest for a second. Parenting is hard work, isn't it? It's hard. I mean, think about it for a second. Your entire life changes the minute you become a parent. Once that baby is in your arms and in your home, things change. You go from getting an average of 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night to maybe 4, especially if you're a mom. You immediately end up with lack of sleep, and then you start realizing, oh my gosh, this kid is a carbon copy of me. And you start seeing all the things that drove your parents crazy popping up in your kids. And you start having to think about punishments. You start having to think about all these things that have to change. And then, let's be honest, the one thing you never want to do when you're with your kids is laugh when you're not supposed to. When they do something that's just ridiculous and you just want to bust out laughing, all it's going to do is reinforce in them that behavior, right? Parenting is something that should absolutely 100% be taken seriously. We all agree. I mean, if you're a parent, you understand and you agree this is a big job. It doesn't matter if you're a new parent. It doesn't matter if you are way up in the parenting ladder. This is where we're going to camp out today. This is where we're going to wind this up. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be real upfront and honest. Some of you may look at me and go, well, you're 40 years old. Your kids are still teenagers in high school. You're absolutely right. They are. I don't have kids that are out of the house. My oldest child is about to turn 14. But I will say this. Raquel and I combined, working together with youth, have over 20 plus years of watching teenagers and watching kids and watching parents and watching the things that parents did that worked, watching the things that they didn't do that worked. Raquel spends an unbelievable amount of time reading and looking and seeing and trying to pull ideas, because one of the things that we realized up front when we became parents was, if you don't have a vision for your family, if you don't have a vision for where you want your family to be and what you want your family to look like, you're never going to get there. You can fluff your way through parenting, you can go through and you can make the rules, you can enforce the rules, but if you don't have a vision for where you want to be and what you want your family to look like, you'll never get there. For us, we decided a long time ago that we wanted our family to be the kind of family that our kids, when they were out of the house, they wanted to come home to. They wanted to come home and be with us and spend time with us as much as they could. Why? Because that's the kind of families that we had. We had families growing up that when we left home, we knew we were going to want to come back and spend as much time with our families as possible. When I left for college, I came home as much as I could, partly because I had a girlfriend at home, but because I wanted to spend time with my family and with my parents. Because it was a place that was safe for me. It was a place that I understood what was happening. And I knew that it was a place where people cared about me and they loved me. You know, Solomon was very, very upfront in the book of Proverbs about what we're supposed to do as parents. And in Proverbs 22:6, he says, train up a child in the way they should go. Train up a child in the way they should go. Even when they're old, they won't depart from it. You have to think about it in these terms. And I love this because he says this one crazy thing. Obviously, we're talking about parenting, so we're dealing with children. But he says, train them. Train them. What is the point of training? This is the key behind all of this. What is the point of training? There's a few things. You train because you want to get better. You want to get better at something. You want to take something that wasn't working or something that wasn't good and you want to make it better. So you train at it so that you can get better. You train, especially in athletics, you train so that your responses and your reactions become second nature. If you're a baseball player and you're an outfielder, you train so that when the ball is hit and you hear the crack of the bat, that you immediately take one step back and you look to see where the ball is and you beeline for the ball. As a soccer player, especially as a goalie, you train so that your instincts are super fast. When you see the ball coming at you, you immediately know what direction to go. You train to build strength, endurance. But as a parent, you train your child so that they can eventually go out on their own and thrive. Right? I mean, isn't that the end goal as a parent? You want your children to be able to leave home and spread their wings and thrive. And if your vision is for those kids to be able to come back home every chance they get, then you have to train that part into them as well. You have to be able to step up and take those things. Listen, there are so many things that go into parenting, and I'm realizing this and I'm learning this. And like I said, some of you guys are way ahead of this journey, way further ahead than I am. But I really want to share with you guys this morning some of the things that Raquel and I have put in place, because some of you guys that are in this room, you're younger than us and you have younger kids. But I want to share with you some of the things that Raquel and I have learned over the years as far as the progression of parenting that we've learned from watching parents who have been amazing parents and watching parents who just really kind of didn't meet that standard. Because let's be honest, not all parents are created equal. And let me go ahead and preface with this too. Not all kids are created equal. Because you can train your kids, and that's why this passage of Scripture in Proverbs is so important. Because not all kids are created equal. You can train your child up, and you can teach them everything they know. You can do everything right, and they will make decisions that will break your heart every step of the way. But what did Solomon say? He said, train up a child in the way they will go. And when they're old, they won't depart from it. Because with wisdom, they understand. So what does it look like? What does the journey look like? How does this whole training process work? Okay, well, there's several different stages of parenting, okay? And we're just going to walk through these one by one. We'll kind of break them apart a little bit. But the first one is this, the discipline years. This takes place usually from birth to about 5 years old. This is the time when there is an immediate consequence for things that happen, or an immediate reward because they've got to understand where boundaries are, right? You know, you have to train a toddler. It's not okay to walk up and put their hand on a hot stove. You have to train them that if they need something to eat, they come and say, I have a need. You train them that that at a certain time they go to bed. You train them that it's okay for them to lay there in a bed and not have somebody right there with them. When they're brand new and they're just learning what it looks like to be a part of your family, you have to start setting things in place so that they know what's okay, what's not. This is the idea of discipline. Discipline is an immediate consequence for something. And here's the thing it's not just an immediate consequence, it's an immediate appropriate consequence. They have to understand it's not okay to lie. It's not okay to take something that doesn't belong to them. It's not okay to do something that's going to get them hurt. And they begin to understand and go, okay, if I do that, okay, I understand. My 5-year-old, well, I was going to say when she's 6 now, but at 5 years old, Micah could look you in the eye and you could say, so tell me what happened. And she wouldn't. She'd be like, I didn't do it. And you look at her and go, I saw you do it. No, you didn't. I saw you do it. If you will tell me the truth, you're going to be in a lot less trouble. We train them what behaviors are acceptable and what behaviors are not. And it carries over. Every child goes through this. It's normal. It has to be done because if you don't set parameters, you don't set boundaries, things will fall apart. Even in the Garden of Eden, God set parameters and boundaries. And look what happened there because humanity is not perfect. You know, we look at Adam and Eve and go, well, they were adults. Well, they may be full grown, but we have no idea how many years had actually passed. For all we know, they could have really only been toddlers. They may have only been around for 2 years. They broke a rule, and there was a discipline issue there that was dealt with. As parents, part of training your child up is setting boundaries and understanding what the discipline looks like. You deal with disobedience, you deal with dishonesty, you deal with disrespect. It's in these first 5 years that we begin to start building into our kids this understanding of there are people who are in authority over you and they need to be respected. When that breaks down, you begin to see some of the issues that we have in our world right now, where there's disrespect for authority in every sense of the word. Once you hit 5 years old and you begin to move on, you go into what we like to call the training years. That age from 5 to 12, where they're in kindergarten up all the way into 5th grade, just before they go into 6th grade. And this is that part where you've laid the foundation of discipline. They understand where the boundaries are. You don't leave the discipline behind. It's going to carry through, but you move into the next phase. This place where you begin to training. This is where Proverbs 22:6 really starts to come into play in a big way, because you start training them to understand what it looks like to live the life that we as believers are called to live. You start looking at what your vision for your family is, and you start saying, this is where we want to get to. So we start putting some things in place to make that happen. And this last week, it was funny because Raquel and I have really made it a big point in our family to put some things in place that we kind of start doing so that we can help create the type of home and family scenario where our kids want to come home to us. And it was kind of funny because she pulled this article up and she started laughing, and I was like, what? She said, let me just read this to you. And it was another lady who had put some things in place. Said, these are the things that I'm trying with my family to try to create a place where my kids want to come back to, where when they're gone out of the house, that they come back to. And I get it, because we want our kids to come back. And I'm like, okay, great, let's listen to it and see if there's anything that maybe we can glean from her and kind of do. And we were laughing because we do a lot of this stuff, and it's kind of funny. And so I want to run through this list of things that she kind of put in place. And one of them was, as your kids get older, spend more time listening than lecturing. As your kids get older, spend more time listening than you do lecturing. And even when they're younger, spend more time listening than lecturing. We live in a world now where once you get to a certain age, your kids don't talk. You guys that have teenagers, you know what I'm talking about. They get to a point where you're like, so how was your day? What's going on in your world? What's going on? I don't know. What do you want to eat? I don't know. Who's your best friend? I don't know. And this is what you get. And there's kind of this thing that starts to happen, like, what if, and this was kind of an interesting point. I'm not saying this is true, but it was an interesting point they made. What if teenagers don't talk to us as parents now because when they were little, we kept telling them to hush? When they would try to tell us about their day, or they would try to tell us about the picture they drew, or they would try to tell us whatever story they concocted in their head that they felt like was the center of their universe. What if, by not taking the opportunity to listen then, we actually trained them that we don't want to hear anything they have to say? It's kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? The second thing that she talked about was building in structure and spontaneity. And let's be honest, let's be real. We all understand the need for structure in our families and in our homes. There needs to be set bedtimes, there needs to be set schedules that you go through. You know that at this time of the morning, you're going to have to get up to get ready for work. You know that at this time of day, you're going to end up eating lunch, give or take. This time of day, you're going to sit down to eat dinner. This time of day, you're going to have to go to school. This time of day, you're going to have to brush your teeth. This time of day, you're going to have to do this. We know. We live in a world of structure. Kids need structure, but they also, even like us as adults, we need structure. But isn't it nice to have spontaneity sometimes? Isn't it nice sometimes to just pop up and say, hey, guess what? I know you got chores to do, but today we're going to go over to Brunswick and we're going to go play pinball for 3.5 hours. Or we're going to load up and we're going to go see a movie. Well, but aren't we supposed to? Yeah, but we're just going to go. Building in spontaneity shows your kids that it's okay to be fun sometimes, and that it's okay to step outside of a routine after you have worked hard to accomplish the things that you needed to accomplish. What about music? We live in a culture, and it's been this way for years. Think back, some of you, when you were kids, and music changed. We went from the 1920s with big band and that kind of stuff, and you end up in the 50s with the beginnings of rock and roll, or maybe even in the 40s with some swing music, and moving on into this era of doo-wop and stuff like that. Every single time music changed, what did your parents do? I just don't get y'all's music. And you created an us versus them thing. It became your music and their music. Listen, when I was a kid, I'd get in the car with my mom and we would listen to 107.7, soft rock. And it was Kenny G and Celine Dion, and I'm over there going. And as soon as we'd get home, I would go in, I'd put my music on the radio in the house and be like, oh, I can breathe again. For us, what this looks like in our family, and this is one of the things we already do, our family, when you walk into our house, you'll hear Pandora playing. One day you may hear 80s music. The next day you may hear country music. The next day you may hear show tunes. The next day you may hear kids music. The next day you may hear worship music. The next day you come back, you may hear worship music again. But we've built this thing into our culture with our kids where we have a mutual appreciation. Yeah, I may not like all the music that's out today, but they know that it's okay to listen to it within reason. Within reason. They know what the parameters are. They know the structure of what's allowed to listen to and what's not. And even now they'll come to me and they'll listen to a song and they'll look up the lyrics to a song and we'll look it up together and they'll go, oh, wait a minute, that's a bad word. Like, yeah, it is a bad word. What do you think you should do? I don't think you should listen to it anymore. Good girl. Because through the training years and the discipline years, you begin to build that stuff into place. As your kids get older and they start building friendships where kids want to come over, adding in an open door policy where, listen, your friends are always welcome here. Your friends are always welcome. You guys come in, we'll have a place set up where you guys can hang out, play games, whatever. But you have a place for your friends to come. This next one is kind of hard, especially for dads. Patience when it comes to current trends. When the miniskirt made its appearance, dads lost their collective minds. When swimsuits went from being one piece to bikinis, parents lost their collective minds. And it just has progressed and progressed and progressed and progressed. Now, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. Modesty is a big deal. I am not saying be okay with showing as much skin as possible. I'm saying through the discipline years and training years, hopefully by the time that becomes an issue, you will have already dealt with the underlying issues of that, and they will understand that modest is hottest. But then when they decide that they want to wear bright, pink, glittery tennis shoes, that you look back and go, okay, that's not worth me getting too irritated with. You deal with the major issues. You have a little bit of patience when they want to wear rubber band bracelets all the way up their wrist because that's not going to hurt them. You're willing to look at it and say, okay, I'll give you a little bit of space there. Building in family events, pizza night. Our family, Friday nights, pizza and movie. Very rarely does it not happen. If it doesn't happen on Friday night, it happens on another night. We build it into our schedule so that we have time together as a family. It adds so much. Journaling. We already said it. Teenagers have a hard time opening up to their parents about things. They have a hard time telling them what's going on in their world. One of the things that, and I asked their permission to do this, but one of the things that Raquel and Nevaeh have started doing is they have a notebook that they write back and forth about what's going on in their life. Nevaeh writes out things that are happening, and Raquel gets an opportunity to respond because, let's be honest, the lifestyle that we live as a pastor's family, we're busy. We're going all the time, and we still have 2 younger children at home who love to spend time with us. And so sometimes Nevaeh may not get the amount of time with Raquel that she needs. And so they've done this as a way to take preventative steps and proactive steps to keep an open line of communication and dialogue going, so that Raquel knows what's going on in her world and knows how she can be the mother that she needs to be. Fortunately, nothing has happened yet that I've had to be called in for. That will be a bad day. But even things as simple as debriefing as a family after an event. You go to a movie together, talk about the movie. Talk about what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what your favorite part was. If you go somewhere off together as a family for the day, even if it's just going to spend some time at Walmart and get lunch. Hey, what was your favorite part of the day? And talking about the things that are going on. And this one here, this is a big one, okay? For you guys that are younger parents, this is huge. I cannot stress this enough. Sending your children to the grandparents' house. Or someone like a grandparent. Yes, thank you. And here's why. Your children will not be in your house forever, but your spouse will. So you have to make sure that relationship is strong. And I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be open and honest. That is something that Raquel and I struggle with. Not that we don't have a good marriage, not that we don't. No, we struggle with making sure that we carve out time just for the two of us to be together because we love being with our kids. And so it makes it hard for us. And then even something as simple as just going outside together as a family, playing together outside. And it seems like a little thing, but here's what happens. When you spend more time outside, it allows your family and your kids to look around at the world around them and go, wow, this world is so much bigger than I am. I am not the center of the universe. They start to understand that there is something out there bigger than them. The homeschool curriculum that we use for our girls, that we used for kindergarten and first grade, spends a lot of time in kindergarten talking about the world and how big it is and showing you where you fit in relation to the rest of the world. It's a huge, huge thing. Part of this idea of training your children, these are the things, when you talk about training, it's not always just about the spiritual training. It's about training them what it looks like to live as part of a family. And so many times now, the families that we have around us, parents aren't training their children what it looks like to be part of a family. So when they leave home, there's nothing there to draw them back. And without this, families continue to degrade and fall apart and not be what they were intended to be. Once you get to this point of these training years and you've reached the end of them, it doesn't just stick there. It goes on to something else that actually, in my opinion, is even harder to do. I've watched parents get to this point and they start rolling into it and then they pull back because it's too hard. And it's the coaching years. From 12 to 18. By this point, you're still going to be training your kids, you're still going to be disciplining them, but your time begins to be limited with the amount of time they're going to have left in your home. And so you have to shift gears. You have to change your way of thinking because this is the point right here, middle school and high school, where your kids are going to get to where they're like, I don't really know that I want to talk to you about this anymore. This is uncomfortable to talk about with you. At this point, you have to start coaching them through life. And what that may mean, and think about this in terms of athletics, of sports, because when we think about coaches, that's what we think about. A baseball coach doesn't go up to someone they've never seen swing a bat and say, you're doing it wrong. They step back and they watch them take a couple swings. And then they say, hey, this is what you were taught. Now, let's look at how we can tweak it a little bit and make it even more effective. The best coaches, the ones who get the best results and the best reactions are not the ones who immediately jump down somebody's throat. They're the ones that actually watch and see a failure happen and then come back and explain how it can be avoided again and move them on through. Well, okay, I get that, but you've already said that preteens and teenagers, they don't listen, so what do? Well, fine. You take time to dial other people into their world. People that you know are going to be telling them the same things that you are. That they're going to be telling them the exact same spiritual truths that you're trying to teach them. Because let's be honest, at some point they're going to stop listening to you as their parent. Because they think they know it all. You guys that have been parents and you have teenagers or you have older kids, you tell them, now wait a minute, listen, if you do that, I know. Well, if you know, you wouldn't have done that. I know. Listen, if you don't want to talk to me, and this is that we've already started with our girls, saying, listen, I know there's going to be stuff you're not going to want to talk about me too, okay? I get it. I understand. But here's a list of people that have already said that they are there for you to talk to. And you start dialing people into their lives. When you dial people into their lives, the opposite is true. Sometimes you have to dial people out of their lives. Limit the amount of time that they're able to spend with people who are negative influences that will pull them further away from Jesus. Because your responsibility as a parent is to train them up to live a life that mirrors Jesus. So the people that you dial into their world have to be living a life that mirrors the life of Jesus. Otherwise, it's counterproductive. And they will start to slip away. Because no longer are they being trained up in the way they should go. They're being trained up in a different way. When you begin training your children, you have to be able to take a step back, and when something goes wrong and they come to you and go, Dad, I got drunk last night. You can't jump up and grab them by the collar and slam them against them. You did what? You have to say, okay. Tell me what happened. And teach through the failure. Respond instead of react. It will go miles and miles. And again, I don't have kids that have been through this, but I've watched for 20 years kids that have gone through this. And I've seen families react in ways that secluded them from the people they needed to be around. And it never comes out great. And so, okay, well, Tim, you're just making that up. No, I'm really not. I'm not. Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Now, let's break this apart a little bit, okay? The word fathers that's there, okay? That, obviously, even in the Greek, it's pater, patros. It literally is father, parental figure, biological father, because you are the one who is going to be dealing with this. You are the one who is going to be disciplining. Now, some people live in a home where mom is doing both jobs, and the same thing still holds true. The word that's used there for provoke literally means to stir up. You don't stir something by accident. You do it intentionally. The word for discouraged doesn't mean like, oh, no, it means broken spirited. That you intentionally stirred something up that broke your child's spirit and damaged the relationship. When you take that into account, this whole passage of Scripture can be completely reread to look like this. Parents, do not intentionally stir up anger in your children, lest they become broken in spirit. That's a hard one. Because that even takes it to the point of teasing your children, just goofing off and playing with them to the point to where they're like, stop, and you keep going. Because eventually what happens is you teach them that no does not mean no. And they begin to, and they start pushing limits because it doesn't matter. Once they reach that point where you're in these coaching years, this is the point where they begin to get a little bit more freedom. So they're going to make mistakes. They're going to trip and fall, and how you respond in those moments will determine what happens next. Because once they reach 18 and they move on out of the house, you end up in what's called the friendship years. The friendship years starting 18 and above. And I use that 18 very loosely because we do live in a world now where not all kids leave home at 18. But 18 and above, you wind up in this place that we call the friendship years. Let's be honest. You can't parent forever. Here's what I mean by that. You can't always swoop in and save the day. You can't always provide everything for your kids. You can't always discipline them. And you can't even always coach them unless they ask you for that. Once they reach this point, the hope would be that the discipline and the training and the coaching that you have done for them has been enough for them to want to come back and spend as much time with you as possible. Not because you're their parent, but because you're their friend. This is completely counterintuitive for the culture that we live in, because we're told, I'm your parent, I'm not your friend. You can be both. It's entirely possible to do both. Because if your kids don't feel like you're in their corner and that you're their friend, it's not good. I've watched for years as kids look at their parents and they say, I cannot wait to get out of your house. And then later, once they're older, they realize, hey, I was completely wrong about you. But there's years there that were lost. Sometimes maybe just a couple of months. But our parenting, when it comes in relationship to our role, dads as spiritual leaders and moms as the mentors for your daughters, when we parent effectively, okay, I'm not going to say good or bad, when we parent effectively, you build disciples. The point of a disciple is to become a carbon copy of what was modeled for them. It may take time, but when we parent effectively, you build disciples in your home. And it replicates over and over and over again. Again, hear me on this. This is not a perfect system because we are not perfect people. We are broken people. Our kids are broken people. They will let us down. They will break our hearts. But as a parent, if you train a child in the way they should go, when they are old, they will not depart from it. With experience comes wisdom. And when they look back, and even though they may make poor decisions, they will look back one day and go, wow, Mom and Dad were right. They were in my corner the whole time. I just never knew it. I just didn't see it. You guys that are in the room that are teenagers or younger, I want you to hear me on this. Your parents are not the enemy. They're not. They're not here to steal your fun. They're not here to put unreasonable expectations on you. They are there specifically to train you up in the way that you should go, because they know that one day you will have a family of your own. And they are doing what God has called them to do. The best way for us to reclaim our families is if every single person involved that is involved in training up the next generation of families, if we will speak life into our families and train our children up to mirror Jesus as we mirror Jesus. If you don't mirror Jesus, you can't expect your kids to. It's just not going to happen, because you become what you surround yourself with. Like I said, I'm not a perfect parent. I never will be. My kids still live at home. But my hope is, and my prayer is, that God will give me the wisdom and the ability, and that he will give Raquel the wisdom and the ability to parent our children effectively and train them up in a way that they will replicate what they see at home, and that we will have a legacy of world changers, and that we will have kids when they look back on their life with us, that they will say, I want to go back because my parents spoke life into me every day. And they showed me what it looks like to be loved by Jesus. That's what my hope is. That's what my prayer is. Why? Because I believe 100% that my family matters. Not just to me, but also to God. And your family doesn't just matter to you. It also matters to God. That's why he instituted it at the beginning of time itself. What you do from this point on with what you've heard for the last few weeks is on you. Whether you use it to speak life into the generations coming after you or whether you sit on it because you think you've got it all together is on you. My hope and my prayer is that starting now, we will be honest with ourselves about the shortcomings that we see in ourselves and our families, and begin to take steps through prayer and through allowing God to change us and transform us and renew our way of thinking so that we can change the course of history. Father, thank you so much for who you are. God, I pray that families will really begin to understand how much they matter to you. I pray that you will alter and change everything about our family structures and make it more like you. I pray that you will absolutely 100% show us how much you love us. Show us where we fail and help us to be more like you. In Jesus' holy name, amen.